Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and the bad things that may be. Let's talk about sex. So, with that intro, today we're going to be speaking about dating and sex. So, the good, the bad, the ugly things about sex in relationships. So, let's get into today's topic without further ado. Hi there, and welcome back. Welcome back to Thinking Out Loud with Rue. I am very, very happy about today's episode because, as a young adult, this is a topic that is, of course, one at some point that we always think about, and that we contemplate about whether you should be having sex or whether you shouldn't be having sex based on whatever you believe in terms of your religious values or in terms of your own experiences about sex and with sex, right? So I was just like, let's speak about it, because when it comes to these conversations, at some point, hopefully, you've had them with your parents. But from my experience, the only way that I had this conversation with both my mom and my dad was from the perspective of do not have sex. Do not even think about it. Do not have sex. It was from that conversation. And I think it was also from that perspective of just fear around what if you get pregnant? What if you contract STIs? What if HIV happens? So it's always from that perspective of we want to protect you from all the negative things that can happen as a result of having sex as a young person. So rather don't have it. But of course, your parents, my parents specifically, my parents have had that conversation with me from that perspective of we are terrified of being grandparents at 30 or at 40, whenever that conversation was had. But I think the conversation really started before, actually it started when I had my first period with my mom. That's when she started having that conversation with both me and my sister, when we started having our period, our menstruation cycle. And with my dad, it was just that conversation at the back of the car, and him saying that, guys, do you know about preventative methods so that you don't get pregnant? Again, it's coming from that space of wanting to prevent pregnancies. But it's not always had in terms of actually speaking about why is sex a thing? Why do men and women have sex? Why is it a thing to even desire or things like that? So I wanted to speak about it from just that perspective of having a healthy relationship with sex. Because I think one of the negative things that comes from having conversations about sex from a perspective of just creating the fear, instilling the fear of God in children, is that there can be an unhealthy relationship that develops with sex. And it can be now a conversation where sex is not even something that they desire. So that even when they get into a marriage, where, of course, for me as a Christian, I do believe that you should be having sex when you are married. Even when a person gets married, they still have an odd and awkward relationship with sex, simply because they were always told not to desire it. They were always told not to be in a situation where it's even a thing that you have thoughts about sex. So because of that, it creates a situation or a platform where even in marriage, people don't know how to be sexual. They don't know how to be how to even desire it, or even have a language to say that this is what I want and this is what I don't want. And I think, of course, with society, when society takes things, it always goes to the extreme. Because recently I decided to watch some sitcoms and rom-coms that I loved in the past, specifically in my late teens and early 20s. So things like How I Met Your Mother. Well, I only started watching it a little bit later on when it came out. Or even Friends or Baby Daddy. And I saw that in these sitcoms, in this series, there was an underlying theme of sex, casual sex specifically, and dating. And of course, in modern day dating, sex is a huge part of the conversation. And most of the times it's a way of just creating emotional connections, physical connections within relationships. And sometimes it's also a way of relieving stress. Just being like, listen, I had a hard day, let's knock out that stress, let's have sex together, and things like that. Or just a way of just, it's celebrated a lot. And it doesn't even have to be in a relationship that it's celebrated. Sometimes it's just casual sex. Have sex with anyone that you want to. And it's seen as a way of claiming back your sexual freedom, or just choosing for yourself and learning and exploring what you like and what you don't like. And it comes from, of course, a culture that had restricted so severely conversations about sex that it was a taboo, that people wanted to reclaim that power for themselves, and they wanted to reclaim that power in terms of just managing your own sexual desire and not managing it from a point of fear about pregnancy or fear about STIs, but just wanting that freedom to explore this beautiful thing that God created, which is sex. But I do think that without healthy conversations being held about sex, about relationships, sometimes people do reclaim their power by getting to the extreme, which is just exploring sex without also understanding and identifying that sometimes there can also be negative things about sex that are not even attached to your STIs and your pregnancy. And it is, of course, emotional attachment. And in the case where two people come together, they have sex, one person has feelings for the other person really doesn't have those feelings. There's going to be emotional attachment, and getting over that person because there was physical intimacy, there was sex that was had. You get to that point where there is a level of difficulty getting over that person because of that. Because ultimately, sex brings people together emotionally, spiritually, and all the things. So getting to that point of letting go of relationships that are unhealthy can be difficult when you have been overclouded by sex. Because sometimes even when we speak about red flags, which is a conversation that I had before this one, when we speak about red flags, it's very difficult to walk away when a person has shown you their true colors and you're just like, this person is not great for me, and you're busy thinking about, oh, but I like the sex that we have together, I like how good this person makes me feel, I like how validated this person makes me feel, because there is something about sex that also makes you feel desired as a human being. So sometimes knowing that you're going to be letting go of that, knowing that you're no longer going to be desired in that similar way again, that you're no longer going to be looked at in that way again, where a person is just like, I love you, I like you, I adore this about you, I've seen you naked and I still like that, like certain qualities about you. Because sometimes we want that. We want a person who knows our strengths and our weaknesses and still chooses us. And sometimes sex has a way of stripping you naked to that level where you start to feel like you like everything about me. And that's not always the case. That's not always the case, which is why I say that there is an emotional attachment that can develop during sex that sometimes is not always spoken about enough. And I think even from just looking at or thinking about purity cultures within Christian communities, most of the times it's just speaking about sex from that perspective of saying that don't have it because you shouldn't be having sex outside of marriage. But most of the times conversations I had from the perspective of negative talking sex to the level where it turns off people even when they get into relationships, they still have negative relationships with sex. And I think it persists even in marriage, where people don't know how to have sex, where people don't know how to communicate what they want, what they don't want, what they like, what they don't like, and things like that, simply because the conversations around sex were not always had from looking at how it can be positive and how it can be negative. It was just had by bashing sex altogether. And I think I've even had a lot of counseling sessions with women who express that they don't enjoy sex, who express that they don't want to be having sex. And I think sometimes it's because this mindset has already been instilled within people from the word go, that they've gotten to a point where they're just like, not for me, not for me. And I think the conversations around sex need to change. They really, really do need to change. And it shouldn't be held from just a place of fear about STIs and pregnancy, but it should be held with just the intention of conveying what is sex, why is sex there. Sex is enjoyable. Communicate that to people, to your kids. Communicate that it is enjoyable. It is meant for a wife and a husband. It's meant for people who are married. But why is that? Communicate it rather from that perspective, because I think there is a lot of protection that can come with knowledge, but with knowledge of the entire thing, the good, the bad, and the ugly things about having sex before marriage. And I think it's also about having conversations from the perspective of sharing your experiences. Of course, when kids are old enough to hear your experiences, to say that, where did you struggle if you did have sex before marriage? Where did you struggle? Was it unplanned pregnancies? Was it STIs? Was it the fact that you got emotionally attached to people that you shouldn't have been emotionally attached to? Share those experiences, because I think that's what contributes to a person actually wanting to abstain, rather than them wanting to just go against whatever you're sharing, because it's showing a lack of insight of what sex actually is. Because even though you might be communicating that sex is bad because of 1, 2, 3, they're also hearing from other people, their peers. They're hearing from older siblings or older cousins that no, sex is actually good. I had it, it's great, it's amazing, you should try it too. Because those are conversations that are also happening behind closed doors. Because even though you are not having that conversation from that perspective, sure, please be certain about this, that they are having that conversation with someone else. And you are the only person who can control how that conversation goes, by actually being able to literally do the groundwork, build that foundation of being able to communicate the good things about sex. Because one of the good things about sex is that it does get to a point where, like I mentioned before, you can build some confidence when you're having sex. Because yes, it can make you feel validated, it can make you feel desired, and who doesn't want to feel desired? Who doesn't want to feel valued in this society? And of course, it can get you to a point where emotionally it's meeting your needs, physically it's meeting your needs. So these are all good things that can happen when a person is having sex with a person, right? It's a good thing. You feel attached to a person that you loved. You feel like, okay, our intimacy is just getting deeper and deeper. All these things are good things. But it's also good to be able to point out the negative things that can come from that. Because if all these things are building emotional and physical intimacy, that is building, you're feeling desired and all that, but you're feeling all these things with a person who there is no commitment, you're going to be feeling abandoned and rejected at the end of the day. Or you're going to be feeling like, okay, so maybe there's something wrong with me because this person keeps on wanting to leave. But they made it clear in the beginning that, listen, I don't want a commitment. But unfortunately, that's something that happens when you have sex anyway. So all those emotions are going to build. All that intimacy is going to breed attachment. And if that person made it clear that they don't want that attachment, you are going to feel rejected at the end of the day. So it's important to be able to communicate that, because from what I see within some of these sitcoms and rom-coms is that they really portray sex as, or rather they portray people who are having sex and people who are just casually having sex regardless of whether or not they're in relationships, casually having sex. They portray it as you are being free. You are literally exploring your autonomy as a human being. And that is the highest form of freedom. The more people that you have sex with, the better, because now you know the type of person that you want to be with. Now you know the kind of sex that you want to be having, because you've had all types of sex. And now you know better about what you want and what you don't want. But the negative things, they don't always communicate, because it's always had from that perspective of it's good because of 1, 2, 3 reasons. But of course, some of the bad things is also the fact that you might get into a relationship with a person who is compatible with you. But because the sex is not that great, you're just like, maybe not this person. But forgetting that sex is something that you can build on. You can improve on. Just because sex starts out bad does not mean that it can't improve. People can testify of this. A lot of people can testify of this. Sometimes it's just about learning your partner, what they like, what they don't like, and being able to replicate that, reproduce that, and move on and do other things. And that's how you learn each other. But there is this idea of, because we started off with bad sex, it's always going to be bad. What happened to communication? What happened to being able to communicate? Oh, I don't like it like that. Maybe let's try something else. And sometimes that's what we need to be doing, to be able to instill in everyone the ability to communicate, so that they can get to that point of being able to build on that. Or even going to see a sex therapist, being able to see, okay, what is inhibiting us from experiencing great sex? Is it sexual trauma that happened from a long time ago? Is it struggle with power dynamics that is happening within the bedroom? What is happening that is contributing to sex not being enjoyable? Being able to actually explore that with the help of professionals to get it to build to that point of being good. But I do think that because sometimes people just focus on the idea of, I want to be test driving the car before I actually buy it. They get to that point of just fixating on the idea that we do need to have sex before marriage, because I need to see, is it good or is it not? Should I commit or should I not because of the sex? But for me, I'm just like, okay, really, do you want a relationship that is just based on something superficial, is just sex? Because at the end of the day, there are going to be seasons where you're not going to be having sex. In those moments, you are going to have to exercise self-control. But if you have never learned in a season of restraint how to not have sex, how to be disciplined enough to be in a room with people that you're sexually attracted to, but you're saying that, no, we're not doing this, then how can you be sure that in a marriage you're going to be able to be committed, so that you don't end up stepping outside of your marriage when that season comes when you're not sexually intimate? So I do think that conversations about sex between parents and children, they need to happen, but they need to happen not from just fearmonger conversations about just wanting to help you abstain, but from literally looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly about having sex before marriage. Because for me, I'm genuinely a person who is just like, listen, I've seen what sex can do in terms of the negative effects when it is outside of marriage. And I'm just at that point of just celibacy, of just acknowledging that, listen, when God says something, it is a boundary that is instilled, not to keep you from something that you should be enjoying, but to protect you from things that could be harmful to you. Because some of these things that we chase, some of these things that have been normalized within our communities are things that can harm you. Yes, in the moment it feels pleasurable because that is what sex is. It is meant to be pleasurable. But in the long run, if you are looking at it, what is the effect that it has had on you outside of marriage? Has it truly empowered you, like society said? Or has it taken away from you? And I'm not here to give you all the answers, because I do think that everyone has their own personal journey. And these are all questions that you have to answer for yourself. But for me, I have explored these things from a psychological point of view and from a Christian point of view. And I've really come to a conclusion to say that some of the things that God has indicated in his word by saying that do not commit adultery, it's not to withhold you from freedoms that you should be enjoying, but it's to give you freedom to be able to enjoy sex even more, because sex is enjoyable when you also don't have anyone to compare this person that you're with to, when you don't have images coming into your mind that remind you of previous sexual partners that you have, when you just know that this is the only person that I've been with and it can only get better because we're growing together in this sex thing, in this sexual relationship. We're growing together, it's improving, it's becoming better because this is the person who knows me. So if you are considering having sex, if you have had sex, it is something to think about, whether to continue or to discontinue if you're not married. But it's just things that I'm posing to you to really think about when it comes to dating. Is sex something that you want to be continuing with? Have you looked at sex by evaluating the good things? Have you looked at sex by evaluating the bad things that come from sex? Don't only focus on the good and zoning in on that in making your decision. Focus on both the good and the bad, and the not so great things, the ugly things that can come from having sex before marriage. So thank you so much for watching this episode. See you again next week. I appreciate you. Please do leave a like, comment, and also share this video if you do feel like there's someone who really needs to hear this. Thank you so much again. See you next week. Peace.